Thank you. So we are here on the 5th Sunday of Lent, and we've kind of jumped our way through the Gospel of Matthew. And last week we jumped we jumped 6 chapters. This week we're going to jump 6 chapters. I told the folks at 8:30 it should be much easier next week. We're only going to jump forward 5. So it's helpful, I think, to take a quick review of what has happened so far in the previous 15 chapters of the Gospel of Matthew so that we can understand Jesus' question to Peter here in chapter 16. Okay? This is some of the high points. Jesus was baptized. Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, called his disciples, taught a bunch of classes, healed a bunch of people, quieted a storm, wrote a manual for ministry. John the Baptist was killed. Jesus fed a multitude of folk, not once, but twice, walked on water, and if that wasn't enough, the disciples, bless their hearts, didn't quite get any of it. And here in the 16th chapter, Jesus, it seems, is taking a moment to assess the situation. Jesus is stopping to see if the disciples really have any idea what's going on. And of course, they try, And some days that's all we can do is say, I'm going to try, Jesus, because that's all I got today. And Jesus, I think, needs to stop and assess the disciples before they can get any further down the road, and certainly before we get to Palm Sunday next week and we get dressed up for a protest march that we pretend is a parade. So Jesus wants a progress report. And so he asks the disciples, what are the gossip magazines saying? What are the rumors about saying? He must know that perception is reality, right? And so he wants to know, what are the stories that are stirring in town about what's going on and who I am? And so they have that conversation. And then Jesus kind of gets to his point. And he said, well, that's fine and good, but who do you say that I am? And that's a different question, I think. It's like Jesus is saying it's one thing. It's one thing to hear other people's stories and to know other people's experiences. That's all fine and good. But now I want to get personal. You've been here. You've been with me on this journey. Who do you say I am? Not what folks are saying in the coffee shop or whispering in the corners or whatever. Who do you know me to be? And you have Peter, God love him. Peter, who had nearly gone for a swim when he tried to walk on the water with Jesus. Peter's sitting there, always so eager, Peter. Ooh, Jesus, me, Jesus, I know the answer to this one, Jesus, call on me. And sure enough, Peter answers correctly. Peter speaks his truth as he knows it to be, as very best he can, and Jesus says, good job, gold star, well done. But that moment for Peter is short-lived, because as the scripture says, the very next verse that Ingrid read says, because from that time on, Jesus shows them they are going to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is not safe for Jesus, nor for Peter, nor for the rest of them. And Jesus says, we're going to go to Jerusalem. And there's going to be suffering, and there's going to be death. And Peter doesn't like this. Ooh, Jesus, hello? Jesus, I think that's a bad idea. I don't think you should do that, Jesus. And Peter like many of us, go into fix-it mode. Anybody go into fix-it mode? Some of us go into fix-it mode. Some of you are smiling as if I don't know who you are. You go into fix-it mode so that you don't have to have this bad situation happen. And Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." Get behind me, Satan. And I think we misunderstand what Jesus means when he says that. Jesus is saying, Peter, bless your heart. You're looking at this from a human lens and how culture views success and power and accomplishment and how society at large thinks the world ought to be organized, but God's ways are different. And I always imagine Jesus looking at Peter, thinking, bless his heart, and shaking his head. Frustrated and a little put out with poor Peter. And of course, in that shaking of the head at poor Peter, I remember I am generally Peter as well. And maybe some of you all too identify as Peter. I am the one trying so hard to avoid a situation going south, or what I perceive to be a situation going south. To avoid the suffering, to avoid the hard and difficult road, looking for an easier way. I'm the one thinking, we can fix this, right? We can fix this, Bill Langley. Don't worry, we're going to figure this out. We got a bunch of smart people. Just put smart people in the room and they'll figure it out. Let me help. Some of you are helpers. I can help. I'll help Jesus with this. It'll be all right. Some of you are thinkers, and so you're going to do some research, and you're going to study the law, and you're going to figure out how to navigate this, legally. Work with the lawyers to get us out of jail and figure all of it out. Go make a plan. And Jesus says to all of us, I'm the line leader. This is a line. I am the line leader, and the line is going this way. Get in line, Peter. And while you're back there, pick up your cross as I pick up mine, because that's the way this road is going. Dang it, Jesus. And this, it seems to me, is the original come to Jesus moment. Right? This come to Jesus moment. Just when Peter thinks he has it all figured out, he not only got a sticker and a star and a smiley face on his paper, right? Jesus says, good job. But you don't have it quite. It's not going to be quite as easy as you think. And Peter still doesn't quite get it. And so not only does Jesus tell this story about going to Jerusalem and suffering and death once, he's going to tell it 3 more times here in the Gospel of Matthew. Because like the rest of us, Peter's a little slow. And he's a little hesitant to understand because he's over here trying to fix it. And he's a little resistant. And I think for many of us, come to Jesus moments aren't always very successful the first time around, and so we need a second. Peter, you heard that list that I read earlier? Those are wow moments. Those are exciting moments. Those are moments of cheering crowds. And Peter reminds us, or he reminds me at least, of the temptation story just a few weeks ago. No, you don't have to suffer. Let me help you. There's a shortcut here. Remember, if you were here with us a few weeks ago when we looked at Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, Jesus was being tempted to cut corners and take shortcuts. Jesus was tempted to live into the world's ideas of success and accomplishment and power. Get behind me, Satan. fall in line. Dang it, Jesus. You know, oftentimes come to Jesus moments are full of suffering. They're complicated and they're hard. Come to Jesus moments, if they were easy, we'd have them more often. This week I was reminded of some Jesus truth by Gino Auriemma. Anybody know who Gino Auriemma is? Come on. Come on, Mark Dickerson, help a sister out here. He is the basketball coach of the University of Connecticut women's basketball program. Thank you for a basketball coach in the room. Some of you are more concerned with, well, none of you are really concerned with the ball games going on in Phoenix because, Kay, you didn't go. It's okay. But I've been concerned about the ball games in Dallas where the women are playing. And Gino Auriemma's UConn Husky women's basketball team went into this week having won 111 straight basketball games. Yes, woo. There are some of the women on that basketball team who had never lost a college basketball game, and some of them had never lost a high school game. Because when you play for Gino Auriemma, you are the best of the best of the best. And they lost. They lost to Mississippi State, whom they had beat last year in the Sweet 16 by 60. That's a whooping, y'all. By 60. These are girls who had never known failure. And they lost on the biggest stage in college basketball. And what does their beloved coach say? What do you say to people who only know cheering crowds and wow moments, Peter? What do you say? Well, I wrote it down so I could tell you. This was Gino in a hallway outside of the UConn women's locker room the other night. I reminded them that this is not normal, what we've been doing. This is not real life. What they are experiencing now, that is real life. And then he said, what we are going to do going forward will probably be more important than anything they did this year. It's easy, Peter, to have your one line of truth when there are cheering crowds and confetti and glitter and happiness. That's easy. But it's in those moments of loss and disappointment that's when you really have to know your truth. And you got to know it for yourself. Peter has a one-liner here. He doesn't bring a 45-page theological dissertation, one line. That's it. An elevator message. Short enough to go on your tombstone. Our icon from our Lenten artist, Andy Julo, of this cemetery. Oftentimes cemeteries are markers for us. Death can be a marker for us. Jesus is trying to help the disciples understand that his death was going to be a marker for them. What's your truth? What's your truth, Peter? What's your truth when you finally lose after 111 straight wins? in our come to Jesus moments, our priorities get reset, our core values affirmed, and we got to feel what feels truth to us when nothing else feels true. A truth that we center and organize our life around. And I think part of our problem is we have tried to have Peter's truth to be ours. You got to be able to say what Peter said, that Jesus is the Messiah, blah, blah, depending on what translation you read. But that's Peter's truth. And our challenge, I think, here is still hearing Jesus say, "Who do you say I am? What is your truth?" In the hard times of death and suffering, what you going to put on your tombstone? What you going to live by? Cheering crowds and falling confetti is great while it lasts. But Jesus says, what's your truth? For you. Because that loss is coming. Loss and suffering are coming. And you better know your truth. There are no answers for this one. Because you got to do the work yourself. What you going to put on your headstone? What's your truth going to be for you? As we approach the days of Holy Week, as we enter next week into a protest march that we dress up as an Easter parade, what's going to be your truth? May we know, and may it be so for us. May it be so for us indeed.